The galaxy was a big place, and most of it was peaceful. For over 300 years, the Galactic Union had kept things calm. Different alien species lived together, traded with each other, and solved their problems with words instead of weapons. Every species had their role. The Velkari were good at talking and making peace. The Threen built amazing machines. The Hasara were traders who could sell anything to anyone. Then humans showed up and applied to join the Union. The debate that followed was the longest in Union history. The problem was not that humans were primitive or backward. The problem was Earth itself. The survey teams came back with reports that most species simply could not believe. Earth was rated as a Class 12 death world, one of the most dangerous planets anyone had ever found. The gravity alone would crush most aliens. The oxygen in the air was so high it would make other species dizzy and sick. Predators hunted everywhere, from the deepest oceans to the highest mountains. The weather could destroy entire cities with wind and water. Earthquakes split the ground open. Volcanoes buried whole regions in burning rock and ash. Even the tiny bacteria on Earth could kill most alien species within hours. And yet humans had not just survived on this nightmare planet. They had built cities, created art, developed technology, and eventually reached for the stars. The Union Council members looked at the data and asked themselves one question: what kind of species thrives in such conditions? After 2 years of debate, Earth was granted probationary membership. The humans could join, but with strict rules. No combat operations, no military missions. Human ships were limited to peaceful exploration and observation. The Union wanted to see if these Deathworlders could control their aggressive instincts. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, looking at supply lists on his screen. His ship was humanity's first deep space exploration vessel, designed to prove that humans belonged among the stars. For 6 months, they had been mapping star systems in the Outer Rim territories, far from the busy core worlds of the Union. It had been boring work, if Jake was being honest. Charts and readings and endless reports. His crew was good, highly trained and professional, but they were getting restless. They had not signed up to be galactic accountants. Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez walked up beside him. She was his second-in-command, a former Navy officer who had served on 3 different Earth vessels before joining the Endeavor. She looked at the same supply lists and sighed. "Another exciting day of counting fuel cells," she said with a tired smile. Jake was about to reply when Commander Tara Wells, their communications officer, suddenly shouted from her station. Her voice was high and shocked, completely unlike her normal professional tone. Jake and Emma ran to her station immediately. Tara was staring at her screen with wide eyes. Her hands shook slightly as she worked her controls. "Captain, you need to hear this. It's coming through on the emergency frequency." Jake put on a headset and listened. What he heard made his blood run cold. The transmission was broken and full of static, but the panic was clear. A Velkari colony ship called the Peaceful Dawn was under attack. Raiders had boarded them. People were dying. Their defense systems were destroyed. They were losing air from multiple hull breaches. Children were screaming in the background. The message gave their location and ended with a desperate plea. The Union fleet was 3 days away. They had maybe 6 hours before the ship broke apart completely. 12,000 civilians were going to die unless someone helped them. Jake looked up at his bridge crew. They were all watching him, waiting for orders. Everyone knew what the regulations said. Human ships were not allowed to get involved in conflicts. They were supposed to observe and report, nothing more. Breaking those rules could get Earth kicked out of the Union. Ryan Cooper, the tactical officer, was already pulling up star charts without being asked. His fingers moved quickly across his console. "Captain, we can reach them in 90 minutes if we push the engines hard." "Do it," Jake said immediately. Emma grabbed his arm. "Jake, the regulations. If we do this, they could revoke Earth's membership. Everything we have worked for." Jake pulled his arm free gently. He understood her concern. She was right about the risk, But he also knew that some things were more important than rules and politics. There are 12,000 people on that ship, Emma. Families, kids. We're the only ones who can reach them in time. He turned to face his entire crew. They were watching him with different expressions. Some looked worried, others looked eager, but all of them waited to hear what he would say next. "I know what the rules say," Jake told them. "I know we are supposed to stay out of trouble and just watch, but those rules were written by people sitting in safe offices on peaceful worlds. They have never heard someone beg for help while their children die around them." He paused and looked at each member of his crew. "On Earth, we have a simple rule. When someone needs help, you help them. It does not matter if they are human or alien. It does not matter if it is dangerous or against regulations. You do what is right." Danny Shaw, the young pilot, spoke up. He was only 23, fresh out of the academy. "Captain, what if the Union punishes Earth for this?" "Then we will deal with that when it happens," Jake said firmly. "But I will not let thousands of innocent people die just to follow rules that value paperwork more than lives. If any of you want to object, speak now. This is my decision and mine alone. I will not let it fall on you." Nobody spoke. Nobody objected. Lisa Park, the weapons officer, checked her console. "Our defense systems are ready, Captain. They are not much, but we have railguns and mining lasers. We can make them count." Jake nodded. "Good. Emma, send a message to the Peaceful Dawn. Tell them help is coming. Tell them to hold on just a little longer." Emma hesitated for only a second, then moved to her station. Jake knew what she was thinking. By sending that message, they were committing to this course of action. There would be no turning back. The message was sent. The Endeavor's engines roared to life, pushing harder than they had ever pushed before. The ship jumped into faster-than-light travel, racing toward the distress call. Jake sat in his command chair and thought about what they were about to do. The raiders attacking the Peaceful Dawn were called the Kragith. They were big, mean, and had been terrorizing the Outer Rim for decades. The Union preferred to negotiate with them, to use sanctions and diplomatic pressure. It never worked, but the Union kept trying anyway. Humans had a different approach to dealing with bullies. The crew worked in focused silence as they traveled. Lisa checked and rechecked every weapon system. Ryan studied what little data they had on Kragith ships. Danny ran simulations on combat maneuvers. Everyone was preparing for a fight that could change everything. Tara suddenly called out, "Captain, we are receiving another transmission from the Peaceful Dawn. It's their captain." "Put it through," Jake ordered. A new voice came through the speakers. It was calm despite the chaos in the background. "Human vessel Endeavor, this is Captain Javara of the Peaceful Dawn. Your message was received. We are grateful, but you must understand what you are facing. There are 5 Kragith raider ships. They are heavily armed. Your ship is small and built for exploration, not combat. You will die if you try to help us." Jake smiled without humor. Aliens always underestimated humans. The Endeavor dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and immediately everyone on the bridge understood how bad things were. The Peaceful Dawn was tumbling slowly through space like a broken toy. Huge holes had been torn in its hull. Air and debris were streaming out into the void. Emergency lights flickered across its damaged surface. 5 Kragith raider ships circled the dying vessel. They were smaller than the colony ship, but moved with the confidence of predators that had never faced real resistance. They took turns firing at the Peaceful Dawn, slowly tearing it apart while they searched for valuables and hostages to sell. Lieutenant Danny Shaw, the pilot, brought the Endeavor in fast. The engines screamed with effort. He was pushing the ship harder than the designers had intended, but nobody complained. They needed speed and surprise if they were going to have any chance. Lisa Park activated every weapon system they had. The Endeavor was not a warship. It had railguns meant for clearing dangerous debris from space lanes. It had mining lasers designed to cut asteroids for valuable minerals. It had cargo claws for grabbing and moving heavy objects. None of it was meant for combat, but humans had always been good at making weapons from tools. The Kragath noticed the human ship immediately. One of their vessels turned and moved to intercept. Through the view screen, Jake could see it clearly now. The raider ship was dark and covered in armor plates. Weapons bristled from every surface. It was built to scare and intimidate. A message came through on the common frequency. The Kragath captain's voice was deep and full of mockery. His translator made his words sound casual, almost bored. Unknown vessel. You have entered a Kragath operation zone. Leave now or you will be destroyed. This is your only warning. Jake looked at his crew. Emma stood ready at her station. Ryan had his fingers over the tactical controls. Lisa was locked onto her targeting systems. Danny's hands gripped the flight controls with steady confidence. Tara monitored all communication channels. Every one of them was ready. "Danny, take us right at them," Jake ordered. "Lisa, charge everything. Let's show these raiders what happens when they threaten civilians." The Endeavor accelerated directly toward the approaching Kragath ship. It was a move that made no sense to the raiders. Smaller vessels were supposed to run away, not attack. The Kragath captain probably thought the humans were crazy or suicidal. He was about to learn that humans were something much more dangerous. On the peaceful dawn, Captain Javara watched through the few working cameras they had left. She was Velkari, a species that had evolved from small prey animals on a gentle world. Her people had no concept of aggression. They solved problems through discussion and compromise. Violence was something they read about but rarely experienced. She watched the small human ship charge at the massive raider vessel and felt her ears flatten against her head in fear and confusion. What were they doing? They were going to be destroyed. The Kragath ship fired first. Energy weapons lit up the space between the two vessels. The shots should have torn the Endeavor apart. But Danny was already moving, his hands dancing across the controls with practiced skill. The human ship twisted and rolled, dodging with impossible speed. The weapons fire missed by meters. Then the Endeavor fired back. The railguns opened up at point-blank range. These were not energy weapons that could be blocked by shields. These were solid metal slugs fired at incredible speeds. They punched through the raiders' forward shields like paper. Holes appeared in the Kragath ship's armor. Atmosphere vented. Systems exploded. Lisa followed up with the mining lasers, concentrating all their power on one spot. The focused beams cut through the raiders' shield generators, leaving them exposed and helpless. The Kragath ship tried to turn, tried to bring its heavier weapons to bear, but Danny was already moving the Endeavor out of their firing arc. The raider captain sent another message. This time there was no mockery in his voice, only shock and growing anger. "You dare attack us? We are Kragath. We are feared across this entire sector." Jake's response was cold and flat. "You attack civilians. You pick on the weak. Let's see how you do against someone who fights back." Ryan called out coordinates. Emma activated the mining charges, small explosive devices that the Endeavor carried for breaking up asteroids. She launched a dozen of them in a spread pattern around the raider ship. The Kragath tried to shoot them down, but there were too many coming from too many angles. The charges detonated simultaneously. The raider's engine section simply ceased to exist. Secondary explosions rippled through the ship as fuel lines ruptured and power systems overloaded. Within seconds, the Kragath vessel was dead in space, venting atmosphere and flames. The other 4 raider ships stopped their attack on the peaceful dawn. For the first time in decades, they faced an enemy that not only fought back but fought with brutal efficiency. The Kragath had built their entire culture on being the biggest and meanest. They had no experience with this. Jake opened a channel to all the raider ships. His voice carried across space with absolute certainty. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel Endeavor. You have one chance to leave this system alive. Take it or join your friend as debris. For a long moment, nothing happened. The 4 Kragath ships held their positions. Jake could almost feel them weighing their options. Their pride demanded they attack. Their survival instincts were telling them to run. Then Commander Kyle Martinez, the security chief, shouted from his station. "Captain, the raiders are firing on the Peaceful Dawn's life support section. They are trying to kill everyone before they leave." Jake swore. It was a move born of pure spite. The Kragath could not win, so they would make sure nobody else won either. Dozens of energy blasts hammered into the colony ship's critical systems. Alarms blared across the Velkari vessel as their life support began to fail completely. "How long do they have?" Jake demanded. Kyle checked his readings. 10 minutes, maybe less. Even if we drive the raiders away now, everyone on that ship will suffocate. The 4 Kragath ships began to retreat, their engines flaring bright as they accelerated away from the battle. They were running, but they had already done their damage. The Peaceful Dawn was dying faster than before. Danny positioned the Endeavor alongside the colony ship. Emma immediately contacted the Velkari captain, her words coming fast but clear. "Captain Javara, we are coming aboard. Tell us how to reach your life support systems." The Velkari captain's voice was filled with despair. "It is impossible. The path goes through sections that are exposed to vacuum. We have automated defense drones that we cannot shut down. Even if you could reach it, the backup systems were damaged in the attack." "Tell us anyway," Emma insisted. "Let us worry about the impossible part." There was a brief pause. Then Captain Javara began transmitting the layout of her ship and the location of the backup life support systems. Jake could hear the hopelessness in her voice. She was doing this because the humans asked, not because she believed it would work. Kyle was already assembling a boarding team. He chose 12 crew members, all of them experienced in dangerous environments. Sergeant Amy Watson, who had served in Earth's deep-sea rescue teams. Corporal Chris Bennett, who had worked in the Arctic research stations. Katie Rogers, their best engineer. Greg Palmer and Nicole Hayes, both veterans of Earth's most hostile locations. They suited up in combat EVA gear, checking their seals and equipment with quick efficiency. These suits were designed for the worst conditions humans could imagine: extreme temperatures, toxic atmospheres, high radiation, zero gravity. They were built by a species that had learned survival on a world that tried to kill them every day. Captain Javara protested weakly. "You cannot risk your lives for us. We are already dead. Better to accept it with dignity than ask others to die trying to save us." Emma's response was sharp. "That's not how humans work. We don't give up, and we don't abandon people who need help. Get your people ready to restore power when we fix your systems." The boarding team gathered at the airlock. Kyle gave them one last check. "Remember your training. Move fast, stay together, watch each other's backs. We have done this 100 times in simulations. This is just another day at work." Amy grinned behind her helmet visor. "Except this time, we're doing it on an alien ship that's falling apart in space." "Details," Kyle said with a slight smile. Then he turned serious again. "Let's go save some." The boarding team moved through the damaged sections of the Peaceful Dawn like ghosts. Their helmet lights swept across twisted metal and floating debris. The cold of space had turned everything brittle and frozen. Kyle checked his wrist display constantly. 7 minutes until the life support failure became complete and irreversible. They reached an intersection where 3 corridors met. Kyle stopped and consulted the map that Captain Javara had sent. The route to engineering went through the central passage, but his helmet sensors were picking up movement ahead. "Contact," Amy whispered over the team channel. "I count 6 objects. Small, floating, probably the defense drones the Velkari mentioned." The drones had been left behind by the Kragath as a final insult. They were simple machines, programmed to shoot at anything that moved. The Valkyrie repair teams had tried to reach engineering earlier but had been driven back by these floating killers. Chris studied the drones through his rifle scope. They are about the size of basketballs, energy weapons, light armor. They have probably never faced targets that shoot back. Kyle made a decision. We don't have time to go around. Amy, Chris, take them out. Everyone else be ready to move fast once the shooting starts. Amy and Chris moved to the front of the group. They braced themselves against the walls, their magnetic boots holding them steady in the zero gravity. Amy counted down on her fingers. 3, 2, 1. They fired together. The rail rifles cracked in the silence, the recoil pushing against their shoulders. The drones never had a chance. 2 exploded immediately. Chris used his magnetic grapple to yank 2 more into each other, their collision destroying both. Amy took out the 5th with a precise shot through its central processor. The last drone tried to retreat, but Katie shot it with her sidearm. The entire engagement lasted less than 30 seconds. Move, Kyle ordered. The team pushed forward, floating through the corridor in the low gravity. They passed the destroyed drones without a second look. Every member of the team had trained for hostile environment operations. This was dangerous, yes, but so was deep-sea repair work or Arctic rescue missions. Humans had learned to function in places that would kill most species instantly. They reached the engineering section with 5 minutes remaining. The heavy blast door was sealed shut. The control panel next to it was dark and dead. Greg examined it quickly and shook his head. No power. We will have to force it. Kyle and Chris positioned themselves at the door seams. They wedged their pry bars into the gap and pulled. The metal groaned. In Earth's normal gravity, this would have been nearly impossible. In the reduced gravity of the Valkyrie ship, with their muscles adapted to a much heavier world, they made it look easy. The door bent, then broke free from its seals. The engineering section was a mess. The Kragath attack had done serious damage. Broken pipes vented frozen gases into the vacuum. Control panels sparked and died. The backup life support system sat in the center of the room, dark and silent. Katie pushed forward immediately, her engineer's eye taking in the damage. She connected her diagnostic tool to the system's main port. Numbers and readings scrolled across her helmet display. After a moment, she swore quietly. How bad? Kyle asked. Bad. The primary power coupling is destroyed. 3 of the main regulators are cracked. The atmospheric processor has a breach in its containment chamber. Even if we had the parts, this would take hours to fix properly. We don't have hours, Amy said quietly. We have 4 minutes. Katie was already moving, pulling tools from her belt. Then we don't fix it properly. We make it work long enough to save lives and worry about the details later. Greg, Nicole, I need your help. The 3 engineers attacked the problem with controlled desperation. They were not following proper procedures or safety protocols. They were improvising, using techniques learned from years of working in Earth's harshest environments, where doing things by the book often meant death. Katie bypassed the destroyed power coupling entirely, running a direct line from an emergency battery that was meant for door controls. It would probably catch fire after an hour of use, but they only needed minutes. Greg cracked open the broken regulators and manually adjusted their internal mechanisms, essentially turning automatic systems into manual ones. Nicole used sealant foam, meant for hull breaches, to patch the containment chamber, creating a temporary fix that would make any Union engineer faint with horror. Kyle watched the time. 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 90 seconds. Talk to me, Katie, he said, trying to keep his voice calm. Almost there. Her hands worked frantically. This is insane. Every safety system is screaming at me. If this thing explodes, it will take out this entire section. Will it work? That was the only question that mattered. Katie made one final connection. Only one way to find out. Everyone get back. The team retreated to the corridor. Katie hit the activation switch and dove after them. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the backup life support system coughed, sputtered, and roared to life with a sound that was definitely not normal. Warning lights flashed across every surface. The system was running far outside its designed parameters, but air began flowing through the peaceful Dawn's ventilation ducts. The atmospheric processors started scrubbing the carbon dioxide and adding oxygen. Temperature controls kicked in, fighting against the cold of space. Kyle checked his readings. Life support is operational. Atmosphere is building in the sealed sections. We did it. The team let out a collective breath of relief. They had done the impossible in less than the time the Velkari said was needed. But that was normal for humans. Impossible was just a starting point. On the bridge of the Endeavor, Jake received the report from Kyle. He allowed himself a small smile. Good work. Get back to the ship. We have got a lot of cleanup to do. On the peaceful Dawn, Captain Javara felt the air flowing into her bridge. Her crew gasped and cheered, a sound that quickly spread throughout the ship. 12,000 Velkari who thought they were dead suddenly had a future again. She opened a channel to the human vessel. Her voice was thick with emotion that even the translator could not fully convey. Captain Morrison, your people have done something we believed impossible. How can we ever repay this debt? Jake's response was simple. No debt. This is what neighbors do. They help each other. Captain Javara did not understand. The galaxy did not work that way. Species helped their allies when there was advantage to be gained. They followed treaties and formal agreements. They calculated costs and benefits. What the humans had done made no logical sense. But over the next 3 days, as the Endeavor crew worked to stabilize the peaceful Dawn, she began to understand something important. Humans were not like other species. They had evolved on a world so dangerous that cooperation was not optional. Every human culture had developed some version of the same core value. You protect your group. You help those in need. You face danger together because alone, you die. Earth had taught them that lesson over millions of years. Now they brought it to the stars. The human crew worked around the clock. They jury-rigged repairs to hull breaches using materials that should not work, but somehow did. They rerouted power systems in ways that violated every Union safety standard, but kept the lights on. They helped evacuate the most injured Velkari to the Endeavor's medical bay, where Dr. Helen Wright worked frantically to save alien lives using medical knowledge adapted on the fly. The Velkari watched these Deathworlders move through their ship with wonder and growing respect. The humans worked in conditions that would kill most species. They lifted debris that should require heavy machinery. They repaired systems while hanging in zero gravity or exposed to radiation that their suits could barely shield against. And they did it all without complaint, without asking for payment, without expecting anything in return except the satisfaction of helping people who needed it. On the 3rd day, sensors detected the approaching Union response fleet. Admiral Krenva was coming with 5 warships and support vessels. Captain Javara sent a detailed report of everything that had happened. She made sure to emphasize that without the humans, everyone aboard the peaceful Dawn would be dead. Jake gathered his crew in the common room. They looked exhausted. 3 days of constant work had pushed them to their limits. But they also looked proud. They had saved 12,000 lives and shown the galaxy what humans could do. The Union fleet will be here in a few hours, Jake told them. I want you all to know that what you did here was amazing. We broke regulations. We risked our ship and our lives. We probably caused a major political incident, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Emma raised her coffee cup. To doing the right thing, regulations be damned. The crew echoed her toast. They knew there would be consequences. Earth's probationary status might be revoked. They might face charges. But they also knew that 12,000 beings were alive because humans had decided that some rules were worth breaking. Kyle spoke up from the back of the room. Captain, do you think the Union will understand why we did this? Jake considered the question carefully. I think they will be confused at first. Most species. The shuttle ride to Admiral Krenva's flagship was quiet. Jake sat alone, thinking about what he would say to defend his actions. Emma had offered to come with him, but he refused. This was his decision and his responsibility. If someone was going to face punishment, it should be him alone. The Admiral's ship was massive, easily 10 times the size of the Endeavor. It was built by the Threen, an insectoid species known for their strict adherence to rules and procedures. Everything about the ship was precise and orderly. Guards stood at exact intervals. Corridors were marked with perfect accuracy. Even the lighting was calibrated to exact specifications. Jake was escorted to a conference room where several beings waited for him. Admiral Krenva sat at the head of the table, his insectoid features unreadable. Captain Javara was there too, along with 3 other Union officials representing different species. They all watched Jake enter with different expressions ranging from curiosity to what might have been anger. "Captain Morrison," the Admiral said, his translator rendering his chittering voice into flat, emotionless words. "Please sit." Jake sat in a chair that was too small for his frame, designed for beings lighter and smaller than humans. He met the Admiral's compound eyes without flinching. The Admiral opened a data pad. "You are aware that human vessels operating under probationary status are forbidden from engaging in combat operations?" "Yes, sir." "You are aware that the Endeavor is classified as an exploration vessel, not a military ship?" "Yes, sir." "Yet you engaged 5 Kragath raider vessels, destroyed one, and forced the others to flee. You then boarded a damaged civilian vessel without proper authorization. You performed repairs using methods that violate 17 different Union safety regulations." The Admiral paused. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Jake took a breath. This was the moment that would define humanity's future in the galaxy. He could apologize and hope for mercy. He could claim he was following emergency protocols. He could try to minimize what they had done. Instead, he told the truth. "Admiral, I received a distress call from a ship carrying 12,000 civilians, including children. They were under attack and would be dead in hours. Your fleet was 3 days away. I was 90 minutes away. What would you have me do? Follow regulations and let them die? Or break the rules and save their lives?" One of the officials, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms, spoke up. "The regulations exist for good reasons, Captain. Species must prove they can control their violent impulses before being granted full operational freedom. With respect, sir, there was nothing violent about what we did. We defended civilians against pirates. That is not violence. That is justice." Captain Javara suddenly stood. Her ears were pressed flat against her head, a sign of extreme emotion for her species. "Admiral, permission to speak." Admiral Krenva gestured for her to continue. "I have served as a ship captain for 20 years, Javara said, her voice shaking slightly. "I have seen how the Union operates. We talk, we negotiate, we form committees and write reports. And while we do all that, people die." She turned to look at Jake. "The Kragath have been raiding our colonies for decades. The Union knows this. We file complaints. We request protection. Nothing changes because nobody wants to risk a confrontation. We have chosen safety over justice." "Captain Javara," the Admiral began, but she cut him off. "No, I must say this. The humans did not have to help us. They risked their ship and their lives for strangers. They asked for nothing in return. They worked for 3 days without rest to save my people. And now you sit here and discuss regulations?" Her voice rose with passion. 12,000 of my people are alive because humans believe that helping others is more important than following rules. If that violates your regulations, then your regulations are wrong." Silence filled the conference room. Admiral Krenva's mandibles clicked together, a sign of agitation in his species. The other officials looked uncomfortable. Javara sat down, breathing hard. After a long moment, the Admiral spoke again. "Captain Morrison, why did you do it? What did you hope to gain?" Jake was confused by the question. "Gain? Nothing, sir. We helped because people needed help. That is what you do." "But surely you expected some form of compensation, political favor, a reward." "No, sir. We expected nothing." The Admiral leaned forward. "Then explain to me why a species would risk everything for strangers. In all my years studying different cultures, I have never encountered such behavior without some underlying motivation." Jake realized the problem. The Union species thought in terms of costs and benefits. They could not comprehend acting without expectation of reward. He needed to help them understand where humans came from. "Admiral, Earth is not like other worlds. Our planet tried to kill us every single day. Predators hunted us. Diseases infected us. Weather destroyed our shelters. Earthquakes and volcanoes and floods threatened our communities. We survived because we learned one crucial lesson. Alone we die. Together, we survive." He stood and began to pace, his words coming faster. "Every human culture, despite all our differences, developed the same core value. You protect your group. You help those in need. You face danger together. It is not logical. It is not about profit or gain. It is about survival. It is about being human." "The Velkari were not part of our group," another official pointed out. "But they needed help," Jake said simply. "And we could provide it. That makes them part of our group. For humans, the group can be your family, your neighborhood, your nation, or your entire species. It can even be aliens we just met. If you need help, and we can give it, we will. That is who we are." Admiral Krenva was silent for a long time. His mandibles clicked in a complex pattern that his translator struggled to render. Finally, he spoke. "Captain Morrison, the Union has existed for over 3 centuries on principles of cautious diplomacy and measured response. We have avoided conflict through negotiation. We have maintained peace through patience. Your actions violate everything we have built." Jake's heart sank. Here it comes, he thought. Earth's membership would be revoked. But the Admiral continued. "However, Captain Javara is correct. While we talked and negotiated, the Kragath grew bolder. While we filed reports, civilians died. We chose order over action, and people paid the price for our caution." He stood, his full height impressive even to Jake. "I am recommending that all charges against you and your crew be dropped. Furthermore, I am recommending that Earth's probationary period be ended immediately. The Union needs members who will act, who understand that sometimes the right choice is also the dangerous choice." Jake could not hide his shock. "Sir, you have shown us something we had forgotten, Captain. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is having people willing to stand up and fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. The Kragath have operated unchallenged for too long. That ends now." One of the officials protested. "Admiral, this sets a dangerous precedent. If we sanction violence as a solution, where does it end?" "It ends," the Admiral said firmly, "when people like the Kragath learn that there are consequences for their actions. For too long, we have let perfect be the enemy of good. We waited for perfect solutions while people suffered." He turned back to Jake. "However, I must warn you. The Kragath will not forget what you did here. You humiliated them. You destroyed one of their ships and made the others flee. Their culture demands they respond to such challenges with overwhelming force." "Let them come," Jake said quietly. "They will find that humans are not easy targets." The meeting ended shortly after. Jake returned to the Endeavor in a daze. When he told his crew what happened, they erupted in cheers. The probationary period was over. Earth was a full member of the Galactic Union, but more importantly, they had started something that would change the galaxy forever. News of the human Deathworlders who answered a distress call spread through Union space faster than any ship could travel. Other species began to see humans differently. They were not just curious newcomers. They were protectors. Over the next few weeks, Jake received messages from colonies and outposts across the Outer Rim. Places that had lived in fear of raiders were requesting human presence. Trade routes that had been abandoned were being reopened with human escorts. The Union Council was flooded with inquiries about Earth's military capabilities and willingness to help defend vulnerable populations. Emma brought Jake a cup of coffee one morning as he reviewed the requests. "You realize what we have done, right? We have made humans the galaxy's police force." "Not police," Jake corrected. "More like the neighbors who will help you move furniture and chase off burglars." "Same thing, really." Jake smiled. "Maybe. But if the choice is between being passive and safe or active and helpful, I know which one I prefer." 3 months after the Peaceful Dawn incident, the galaxy had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. Human ships were now a common sight in the Outer Rim territories. Trade stations that had operated with skeleton crews now requested human security advisors. Colony worlds that had considered abandoning their settlements now felt safe enough to expand. The simple presence of Deathworlders made pirates think twice before attacking. But it was not all peaceful progress. The Kraggoth had been quiet for too long. Their silence made everyone nervous, especially the humans who understood that predators were most dangerous when they stopped making noise. The Union Council met on Convergence Prime, their capital world. Representatives from dozens of species filled the massive chamber. The topic of discussion was the same one that had dominated their meetings for weeks: what to do about the Kraggoth threat and whether to formally request human military assistance. The debate was heated. The Velkari, naturally, supported immediate action. They had experienced human help firsthand and wanted that protection extended to others. But many species were uncomfortable with the idea of militarizing the Union. They had built 3 centuries of peace through diplomacy. Asking humans to fight their battles felt like admitting failure. The debate became meaningless when the Kraggoth made their decision for them. The attack came without warning. 30 raider ships, the largest fleet the Kraggoth had ever assembled, hit multiple targets simultaneously. They struck trade stations, mining operations, and colony worlds. It was coordinated and brutal, designed to prove that the Kraggoth were still the dominant power in the Outer Rim. One of the targets was a Threen industrial complex that processed rare minerals. Over 50,000 workers lived and worked there. The facility had minimal defenses, relying on Union protection that had always arrived too late. The Kraggoth fleet hit them hard and fast, overwhelming their security systems within minutes. The distress call reached Earth within an hour. Admiral Victoria Pierce, commander of Earth's United Fleet, received the message in her office at Orbital Command Station above Earth. She was a veteran of 3 different conflicts, a woman who had spent her entire career preparing humanity for the challenges of space. She read the report twice, then made a decision that would define Earth's role in the galaxy. Within 30 minutes, 5 human warships launched from Earth's orbital shipyards. These were not exploration vessels like the Endeavor. These were purpose-built military ships, armed and crewed by soldiers who had trained for exactly this scenario. Earth had been preparing since the Peaceful Dawn incident, building a proper defense force to protect Union space. The flagship was called the Defiant, a name chosen to send a message. Humans would not back down from threats. They would not hide behind diplomacy when action was needed. Admiral Pierce commanded from its bridge, surrounded by officers who shared her determination. Jake Morrison was there too, now promoted to commander and serving as coordinator for rapid response operations. The Endeavor had been upgraded and assigned to the fleet. Emma Rodriguez stood beside him, her expression grim as they reviewed tactical data on the enemy fleet. 30 ships, she said quietly. They are serious this time. Good, Jake replied. So are we. The human fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, racing toward the Threen facility. They covered the distance in hours, arriving to find the industrial complex under siege. Kraggoth ships surrounded it, firing steadily at the defensive shields while boarding parties tried to breach the hull. Smoke and debris clouded the space around the facility. Admiral Pierce stood on the bridge of the Defiant and assessed the situation with cold efficiency. The Kragath had numbers and position, but they had grown complacent from decades of easy victories. They expected their enemies to run or beg. They did not expect what happened next. "All ships," Pierce said over the fleet channel, "execute Pattern Delta. Show them why Earth builds warships." The 5 human vessels came in like a coordinated predator pack. They did not bunch together like the Kragath did. They spread out, covering different angles, supporting each other while maintaining individual freedom of movement. It was a formation developed from centuries of naval warfare on Earth, adapted for 3-dimensional space combat. The Defiant led the charge, its weapons blazing. Railguns punched through Kragath shields with devastating force. Missile pods launched swarms of smart projectiles that dodged defensive fire and struck critical systems. Energy weapons carved through armor plating that had seemed impenetrable. But it was the coordination that truly shocked the watching Kragath. The human ships moved as one, communicating constantly, adapting their tactics in real time. When one ship drew fire, another would strike from a different angle. When the enemy tried to focus on a single target, the humans would scatter and regroup. They fought like a school of fish facing a shark, except these fish had teeth. Jake watched from the Endeavor as they engaged a group of 5 Kragath raiders. Danny brought them in fast, Emma coordinated fire with the other ships, and Lisa unleashed everything they had. The raiders tried to respond, but they had no experience fighting an enemy that refused to behave like prey. Within 20 minutes, 6 Kragath ships were destroyed. Within 30 minutes, 9 more were crippled and drifting. The remaining raiders began to break formation, their confidence shattered by an enemy that fought with efficiency they had never encountered. Admiral Pierce opened a channel to the entire Kragath fleet. Her voice was calm but carried an edge that made even her own crew straighten. "Kragath vessels. This is Admiral Victoria Pierce of the Earth United Fleet. You have attacked civilians under Union protection. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. You have 60 seconds to comply." The Kragath commander responded with the expected bravado. They were warriors. They did not surrender to prey species. They would fight to the death for glory. "Your choice," Pierce said simply. She cut the channel and gave new orders to her fleet. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. The human fleet executed a maneuver called the Hammer and Anvil. 3 ships drove the Kragath raiders toward the other 2, compressing them into a killing zone where they could not maneuver effectively. The trapped raiders tried to break through, tried to scatter, but the humans had predicted every move. The battle lasted 47 minutes total. When it ended, 12 Kragath ships were nothing but expanding clouds of debris. 15 more were crippled, their crews broadcasting surrender messages and begging for mercy. The remaining 3 managed to jump away, fleeing back to Kragath space with their tails between their legs. The human fleet suffered damage, but no casualties. Admiral Pierce had kept her promise to bring everyone home alive. The Threen facility was saved. Workers emerged from shelters to find human ships holding position protectively around their home. They had heard stories about the Deathworlders, but seeing them in action was something else entirely. These humans had fought off an enemy that had terrorized the Outer Rim for decades, and they made it look almost easy. The reaction across the galaxy was immediate and overwhelming. The Union Council called an emergency session. This time there was no debate. They formally requested that Earth take a leadership role in securing Union space. The probationary period was not just ended, but erased from the records. Earth was granted full military authority to protect civilians and maintain peace in the Outer Rim territories. But more importantly, other species began to see humans as something more than just members of the Union. They were protectors. When danger came calling and others hid, humans ran toward the fire with weapons and tools and an unshakable will to help. The Kragath leadership, watching their fleet destroyed and their warriors humiliated, made one final decision. They requested formal peace negotiations. For the first time in their long history as raiders and conquerors, they had encountered a species that was better at violence than they were. And predators, real predators, knew when to back down from a stronger opponent. The negotiations took place on a neutral station 6 weeks later. Representatives from every Union species attended. The Kragath arrived in ornate armor, trying to maintain dignity despite their recent defeats. They sat across from the human delegation, ready to offer the usual excuses and half-measures that had always worked with other species. Jake Morrison was there representing Earth, along with Admiral Pierce and several other officials. Captain Javara attended as well, representing the Velkari. She wanted to see this moment, when the species that had terrorized her people for so long would finally face justice. The Kragath leader began with a long speech about historical misunderstandings and cultural differences. He spoke of honor and warrior traditions. He suggested minor changes to raiding routes and compensation payments that would mean nothing. Admiral Pierce let him finish. Then she responded in a way that stunned everyone in the room. She simply played a recording. The recording showed the battle at the Threen facility in complete detail. Every moment of human tactical superiority, every Kragath ship destroyed or crippled, every surrender broadcast. The message was clear. This is what happens when you threaten innocent people and humans are nearby. When the recording ended, Pierce spoke. Her words were simple and direct. The raids stop, all of them. Every hostage is returned. Every stolen ship is given back. You will pay reparations to every colony you have attacked, and you will allow Union monitoring teams into your territory to ensure compliance. The Kragath leader bristled. You cannot dictate terms to us. We are a proud warrior culture. You were a raider culture that preyed on the weak, Pierce corrected. That ends now. You have two choices. Accept these terms and we leave your territory alone. Refuse, and we will enforce peace ourselves. Earth has 50 more ships under construction. The Union has asked us to patrol the Outer Rim permanently. Test us if you want, but I promise you will not like the results. The room was silent. Other Union species watched with a mix of shock and satisfaction. They had never seen anyone speak to the Kragath this way. The raiders had always been handled with careful diplomacy and endless negotiations. The Kragath leader looked at his advisors. They had no good options. Pride demanded they refuse. Survival demanded they accept. After a long moment, he lowered his head in the Kragath gesture of submission. We accept your terms. The treaty was signed that day. The age of Kragath raiding was over. Other pirate groups in the region, watching what happened to the most feared raiders in the sector, began to reconsider their lifestyle choices. Peace, it turned out, was much easier to maintain when there were consequences for violence. 6 months later, Jake stood in his office on a Union coordination station looking out at the stars. The room had a viewport that showed human ships moving on patrol routes, protecting trade lanes and colony worlds. Earth had 50 vessels in service now, with more being built every month. The Outer Rim had never been safer. Emma entered carrying 2 cups of coffee, another Earth export that had become popular across the galaxy. She handed one to Jake and stood beside him at the viewport. The Council wants to expand the program, she said. They are asking for 100 more ships and crews. Jake nodded. He had expected this. Once the Union saw what humans could do, they wanted more of it. Earth will provide them. We have enough volunteers to crew 500 ships if needed. Do you think we really changed things? Emma asked. Or did we just delay the inevitable? Jake thought about the question. He thought about 12,000 Velkari who were alive because humans answered their distress call. He thought about 50,000 Threen workers who could sleep safely because human ships protected their home. He thought about the countless others who now lived without fear of raiders. "We change things," he said firmly. "The galaxy used to work on the assumption that problems could always be talked away, that threats would back down if you were reasonable enough. We proved that sometimes you need people willing to fight for what is right, not because they enjoy violence, but because someone has to stand up for those who cannot defend themselves." Emma raised her coffee in a toast. "To the Deathworlders." Jake smiled and touched his cup to hers. "To everyone who answers the call." Down on Earth, in recruitment centers across every continent, young people lined up to join humanity's interstellar defense force. They came from every nation and culture, unified by the same drive that had helped humans survive on their deadly homeworld. The drive to protect, the drive to help, the drive to run toward danger when others needed them. The aliens had cried for help. The Deathworlders had come with fire. And the galaxy learned what it meant when humans decided someone needed protecting. They learned about a species that valued life over rules, action over endless debate, and helping others over personal safety. The age of passive peace was over. The age of protected peace had begun. And at its heart were the Deathworlders of Earth, proving every day that the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy were also the most willing to help. Somewhere in deep space, another distress call would eventually sound. Another life would hang in the balance. Another desperate plea would echo into the void. And when that moment came, there would be humans ready to answer, carrying with them the fire and determination that came from millions of years of survival on humanity's beautiful, terrible, wonderful death world called Earth. The peaceful dawn reached its destination colony world 2 weeks later. The Velkari survivors voted unanimously to name their first settlement Morrison's Landing, despite Jake's protests. They erected a monument showing a human figure standing with arms raised protectively, with the inscription, "When we called into the darkness, they came with fire and hope." But not everyone was happy with these changes. In the Outer Rim territories, the Kragath leadership gathered to discuss what they called the human problem. For the first time in their history as raiders and pirates, they faced a species that fought back with skill and determination. They would respond. The question was how and when. Jake stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, looking at the stars, knowing that the real challenges were still ahead. They had saved 12,000 lives and changed humanity's place in the galaxy. But they had also made powerful enemies and set expectations they would have to live up to. Emma stood beside him. "No regrets?" "None," Jake said. "We did the right thing. Whatever comes next, we will handle it together. That is the human way." Out here, think logically. They calculate risks and benefits. They follow procedures. What we did does not fit into their worldview. But eventually, he continued, they will realize something important. The galaxy has been peaceful because everyone was too afraid or too passive to fight back. The raiders and pirates operated freely because nobody stopped them. Well, we stopped them. And maybe, just maybe, we showed the rest of the Union that sometimes peace requires people willing to stand up and fight for it. Amy grinned. "So we are either heroes or the biggest troublemakers in Union history." "Probably both," Jake said with a slight smile. The Union fleet arrived right on schedule. Admiral Krenva's flagship, a massive Threen vessel, took up position near the peaceful dawn. Jake received a message almost immediately. He was to report to the Admiral's ship for a formal inquiry. Jake put on his dress uniform and prepared for what might be the most important meeting of his life. The fate of humanity's relationship with the Galactic Union might depend on what happened in the next few hours. Lives. The airlock opened and the boarding team crossed through a flexible tube that connected the two ships. The moment they entered the peaceful dawn, they knew they were in a different world. The corridors were built for beings much smaller than humans. They had to move hunched over. The gravity was barely half what they were used to, making every step feel strange and light. And there was no air. The atmosphere had vented completely in this section. Emergency lights flickered weakly, barely illuminating the twisted metal and debris floating in zero gravity. Kyle led them forward, his helmet light cutting through the darkness. Behind him, the rest of the team moved in a tight formation. They passed sealed compartments where Velkari survivors huddled, watching through portholes as these strange beings moved through conditions that should kill any living thing. The humans moved with confidence. They had trained for this. More than that, they had evolved for this. Earth had taught them to function in hostile environments. Space was just another challenge to overcome, but they only had 8 minutes left before everyone on the peaceful dawn would be dead. The clock was ticking, and 12 humans were racing against time to do the impossible. Ed at size and official ratings and thought they knew everything. They did not understand that humans had spent millions of years fighting just to survive on their deadly homeworld. Captain J. Vara, this is Captain Morrison. We are coming whether you think we can help or not. Just keep your people alive for 90 more minutes. There was a long pause. Then the Velkari captain spoke again, her voice filled with emotion that her translator could barely convey. Thank you, Captain Morrison. Thank you. The transmission ended. Jake looked at the countdown timer on his screen. 87 minutes until they reached the peaceful dawn. 87 minutes until they either saved 12,000 lives or died trying. Emma stood beside his chair. Jake, even if we survive this, the Union is going to be furious. I know, Jake said quietly, but at least those 12,000 Velkari will be alive to see it. The Endeavor raced through space, carrying humanity's first real test in the galaxy. They were about to show the Union what Deathworlders really meant. When someone called for help, humans answered, and they came ready to fight.